The Hall of Accord on the capital world of Velcora Prime had seen wars declared, empires dissolved, and species welcomed into the wider galaxy. But never had it seen this. A line stretched across the marble floor of the chamber. Not a short ceremonial line. Not a delegation of diplomats. A queue of warriors. Dozens of species stood shoulder to shoulder beneath the towering banners of the Galactic Concord. Feathered tacticians from desert worlds. Scaled strategists from ocean planets. Armored giants from high-gravity systems. All waiting for the same thing. An assignment. Specifically one assignment. To fight beside a human. Commander Arel Voss of the Terran Coalition stood near the center of the chamber, her silver skin reflecting the pale blue light from the vaulted ceiling. Her species had evolved under twin suns. Their culture valued precision, patience, and flawless planning. They did not stand in line for anything. Yet here she was. Because across the chamber, near the central dais, stood a single human officer in simple field uniform. Captain Elias Ward. He did not glow with bioluminescence. He did not possess claws, venom, or psychic projection. He looked ordinary. And yet the air felt heavier around him. Arel folded her four-fingered hands behind her back. "This is irrational," she murmured to the reptilian general beside her. General Kroth of the Dravari let out a low rumble. "It is statistical." She turned one sharp eye toward him. Kroth gestured with his tail toward a holographic display rotating slowly above the chamber. A map of the frontier sector known as the Outer Veil flickered in pale light. 3 months ago, pirate fleets had begun destabilizing pre-space civilizations in the region. Advanced weapons had appeared on primitive worlds. Political manipulation. Economic collapse. The Concord had responded with task forces. Every single one had failed. Except one. A small, mixed-species unit under temporary human command. They had not won through superior firepower. They had not deployed planet-cracking weapons. They had studied supply routes, manipulated pirate greed, turned rival factions against each other. Within 12 days, the pirate coalition collapsed without a single planetary bombardment. Minimal casualties. Maximum strategic effect. Human command. Kroth's golden eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Probability of mission success increases by 37% when a human tactical officer is present. Arel resisted the urge to sigh. "You sound like a recruitment advertisement." "I sound like a realist." At the center dais, Captain Ward shifted awkwardly as another delegation finished speaking with him. "I'm telling you," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "you don't need to line up. It's a standard joint operation." The avian admiral in front of him clicked her beak. "Standard operations do not dismantle 3 pirate syndicates without open war." Ward blinked. "We just adapted." Adapted. That word had become a legend. Across the galaxy, species evolved into ecological niches. Perfected one survival strategy. Refined it across millennia. Humans did not refine. They improvised. And that terrified and fascinated everyone. A chime echoed through the hall. The High Mediator of the Concord rose from her elevated platform. "Attention," she announced. "The mission parameters are as follows. A reconnaissance and stabilization task force will deploy to the contested world of Katha's Fall." Arel stiffened. Katha's Fall was not just contested. It was collapsing. A pre-warp civilization had reverse-engineered fragments of illegal off-world technology. Civil war had erupted. Atmospheric infrastructure was failing. Famine had begun. Direct intervention risked cultural contamination. No intervention meant extinction. The Concord required precision. They required restraint. They required a multi-species special operations unit under joint command, the mediator continued. Captain Elias Ward will serve as strategic coordinator. The chamber shifted. Every warrior in line straightened. Arel felt her pulse accelerate. Not because of glory, but because this was the moment. Assignments would be selected. And only a handful would be chosen. The mediator's voice softened slightly. "Be advised. This mission prioritizes preservation of life and long-term societal stability. Excessive force is prohibited. Innovation is encouraged." A faint murmur rippled across the hall. Innovation. That was Concord language for, "Let the human think." Selection began. Names were called. Kroth was selected. The avian admiral. A cybernetic tactician from the Halion systems. And then, Commander Arel Voss, Terran Coalition. Her breath caught. She stepped forward, boots echoing softly across the polished floor. As she approached the dais, she studied Captain Ward closely for the first time. He looked tired. Not heroic. Not radiant. Just focused. He extended his hand in the human greeting. She hesitated only a fraction of a second before placing her hand in his. His grip was warm, firm, steady. "Looking forward to working with you, Commander," he said. There was no arrogance in his tone. No awareness that dozens of warriors had competed for this chance. Just sincerity. And somehow that unsettled her more than pride would have. After the selections concluded, the rest of the chamber slowly emptied. Those not chosen watched with expressions ranging from disappointment to awe. Arel overheard one murmur in the departing crowd. "The highest honor in the galaxy is fighting beside them." She glanced at Ward. He was reviewing mission data on a handheld display, completely oblivious to the reverence. Hours later, aboard the Concorde cruiser Silent Resolve, the chosen team assembled in the briefing chamber. A hologram of Katha's fall rotated between them. Storm systems raged across its northern hemisphere. Orbital debris cluttered low atmosphere. Ground conflict zones glowed in red clusters. Ward tapped the projection. "Okay. Here's the situation. If we go in heavy, we accelerate their technological collapse. If we do nothing, they wipe themselves out." Croth crossed his massive arms. "Direct military strike would neutralize hostile factions in under 8 hours. And destabilize the entire planetary ecosystem," Arel added. Ward nodded. "Exactly. So we don't strike." Silence. The Helion tactician tilted her mechanical head. "Clarify." Ward zoomed the hologram toward a network of power grids. "We solve their energy crisis." Arel blinked. "That is not a combat strategy." "Sure it is," Ward replied casually. "Their war started over resource scarcity. Restore stable infrastructure, food production resumes. Factions lose leverage. Conflict de-escalates." Croth's brow plates lowered. "You intend to end a war by repairing generators." Ward shrugged slightly. "Worked before." Arel studied him carefully. He wasn't dismissing combat. He was bypassing it. Humans did not always defeat enemies. Sometimes they removed the reason to fight. That was dangerously effective. The briefing continued. Insertion would be covert. Minimal footprint. They would pose as atmospheric researchers. Repair key fusion hubs. Stabilize climate regulation. All without revealing off-world interference. Risk level, extreme. Honor level, immeasurable. As the others dispersed to prepare, Arel remained behind. Ward noticed. "Something on your mind, Commander?" She considered her words carefully. Many species requested this assignment. He grimaced faintly. "Yeah, I heard. They believe fighting beside a human increases their odds of survival." He leaned against the console. "And what do you believe?" She studied him. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp. Calculating. Anticipating variables. "I believe," she said slowly, "that your species approaches problems from unexpected angles." He chuckled softly. "That's one way to put it. You are aware that your reputation borders on myth." Ward rubbed his temples. "We trip over our own shoelaces half the time. Yet you succeed. Because we keep getting back up." There was again. Not power. Persistence. Arel felt something shift inside her. Perhaps the honor was not about invincibility. Perhaps it was about resilience. The ship's engines vibrated as it shifted toward jump coordinates. Katha's fall awaited. A world on the brink. A test not of strength, but of wisdom. As Arel exited the chamber, she realized something profound. The line in the Hall of Accord had not formed because humans were unstoppable. It had formed because they were unpredictable in the best possible way. They fought not just with weapons, but with ideas. And in a galaxy trapped by tradition, that made them invaluable. The jump drive ignited. Stars stretched into brilliant streams of light. And for the first time in her disciplined, carefully structured life, Commander Arel Voss felt something dangerously close to excitement. Because soon, she would learn firsthand whether the legend was true. Whether the galaxy's greatest honor really was fighting beside a human. The descent toward Katha's fall was anything but smooth. From orbit, the planet looked wounded. Massive storm systems churned across continents. Lightning arced between cloud layers like veins of electric fury. In several regions, city lights flickered unevenly, evidence of unstable power grids. Commander Arel Voss stood in the troop bay of the shuttle, magnetic boots locked to the floor as turbulence rattled the hull. Across from her, Captain Elias Ward adjusted the environmental readouts on his wrist display. Atmospheric particulates are worse than expected, he muttered. Industrial overload. General Kroth's deep voice reverberated in the chamber. Civilizations collapse loudly. Ward gave a half-smile. Sometimes they collapse quietly. Those are the dangerous ones. Arel studied him. Even now, with alarms flickering amber around them, he did not radiate heroism. He radiated analysis. That unsettled her more than confidence would have. The shuttle pierced through the cloud layer. Below them sprawled the fractured capital region of Narif City. Skyscrapers leaned at unnatural angles. Entire districts were dark. Smoke curled upward from scattered impact sites. And in the center of it all, a massive fusion spire. Offline. Ward tapped the display and projected a schematic into the shuttle air. That's Hub Prime. It used to power 38% of this continent. When it failed, everything downstream destabilized. Water purification, food production, climate control. Kroth narrowed his eyes. Sabotage? Not exactly, Ward replied. Overclocked. They pushed it beyond safe limits trying to support wartime manufacturing. Arel folded her hands behind her back. So they broke their own foundation. Ward nodded once. War tends to do that. Landing was discreet. They touched down in an abandoned atmospheric research facility on the outskirts of the city. The cover story had already been injected into local data networks. Off-world climate consultants offering stabilization assistance. Minimal footprint. Minimal interference. Maximum impact. That was the theory. Inside the crumbling facility, the team established a command post. The Helion tactician interfaced with local satellite remnants. Military activity concentrated in 3 sectors, she reported. 2 primary factions. Both attempting to seize remaining energy nodes. Kroth flexed his claws. We could neutralize leadership in under an hour. Ward shook his head immediately. No decapitation strikes. Power vacuum creates worse fragmentation. Arel watched the exchange carefully. In most military briefings across the Galactic Concord, Kroth's suggestion would have been considered efficient. Logical. But Ward dismissed it without hesitation. Not because it was impossible. Because it would cause ripples. Humans seemed obsessed with consequences that extended beyond the battlefield. Hours later, disguised in adaptive field gear, the team approached Hub Prime. The fusion spire loomed above them like a metallic skeleton, cracked and dark. Sporadic gunfire echoed in distant streets. Civilians moved cautiously between barricades, faces hollow with exhaustion. Arel felt something tighten in her chest. This was not a battlefield of glory. It was a battlefield of survival. Ward crouched near the primary access hatch and scanned the interface. They patched it with scrap code, he said. Half the safety protocols are missing. Can you restore it? Arel asked. He paused. Maybe. Not certainty. Not bravado. Just possibility. And somehow that felt more honest. Inside the reactor chamber was immense. Cooling towers stood silent. Emergency lights flickered weakly. The Helion tactician projected diagnostics across the air. Core instability at 62%, she said. Restart attempt risks cascade failure. Kroth growled softly. Meaning explosion. Meaning continent-wide devastation, Ward corrected. Silence settled over the chamber. Arel stepped closer to the central console. You have a plan. Ward exhaled slowly. Not a full one yet. She stared at him. Captain, this is not the moment for improvisation. He met her gaze calmly. It's always the moment for improvisation. Outside, explosions rattled the upper structure. One of the factions had tracked energy fluctuations from their arrival. Gunfire intensified. The Helion tactician's voice sharpened. Armed units approaching. 30 individuals. Kroth's posture shifted instantly into combat readiness. Permission to engage. Ward hesitated only a fraction of a second. Non-lethal if possible. We're not here to become the next warlord. The Dravari general nodded once and moved toward the entrance. Arel followed. Plasma bolts streaked through shattered windows. Kroth deflected incoming fire with disciplined precision. Arel used targeted disarms, disabling weapons rather than soldiers. They were efficient, measured, professional. And through it all, Ward remained at the reactor core. Working. Minutes later, Kroth re-entered the chamber. Opposition neutralized. Ward didn't look up. Stabilization field rerouted. I'm trying to balance load across secondary conduits. Arel approached cautiously. You are attempting to restart the grid. Not fully, he replied. Just enough to bring water systems online. That will not end the war. No, he agreed. But it buys hope. Hope. Another strange human obsession. Suddenly the reactor alarm screamed. Core instability spiked. The chamber lights flashed red. The Halion tactician's voice cut sharply through the noise. Containment failure imminent. Arel felt cold certainty wash over her. They were seconds from catastrophe. Croth stepped forward. Evacuation. Ward's hands flew across the console. No, Captain. I can vent it manually. Arel stared at him. That will expose you to lethal radiation. Probably. The word was too casual. Why? She demanded. He didn't look at her. Because if this goes critical, millions die. There was no dramatic speech. No declaration of heroism. Just arithmetic. One life versus millions. Before Arel could physically restrain him, Ward accessed a maintenance shaft and descended toward the overheating core. Croth moved to follow, but Ward's voice echoed up the ladder. Stay back. If this fails, you'll need to get word out. Arel's hands trembled, an unfamiliar sensation. This was not tactical brilliance. This was sacrifice. Unnecessary. Reckless. Human. Inside the shaft, Ward reached the manual override valves. Radiation warnings blared across his wrist display. He ignored them. Sweat beaded across his forehead as he forced open the first vent channel. The reactor roared. Steam burst upward through exhaust ducts, venting superheated plasma safely into upper atmosphere. Core instability dropped from 89% to 71%. Still critical. He gritted his teeth and opened the second valve. Metal groaned. Arel watched the readings from above, her pulse racing. Stability improving, the Halion tactician reported. 55%. 48%. The alarms gradually shifted from red to amber. Ward climbed back up, pale but conscious. Croth caught him as he staggered. You risked termination, the Dravari general said bluntly. Ward managed a weak grin. Engineering habit. We fix what we break. Arel stared at him. You did not break this reactor. He looked at her evenly. No. But we chose to interfere. That makes it our responsibility. Responsibility. Another human trait that defied galactic logic. As water purification systems flickered back to life across the city, something unexpected happened. Gunfire slowed. Then stopped. Both factions, monitoring energy signals, realized the grid was stabilizing. Their reason for fighting, control over scarcity, began dissolving. Within hours, civilian broadcasts replaced military ones. Relief. Confusion. Tentative ceasefires. Back inside the reactor chamber, Arel watched Ward sit quietly against the wall, recovering. He did not look triumphant. He looked tired. You endangered yourself, she said softly. He shrugged. Part of the job. You insist you are ordinary. I am. No, she replied slowly. You are not. He raised an eyebrow faintly. What makes you say that? She glanced toward the city skyline where lights were returning sector by sector. Because you fight differently. He followed her gaze. Every species fights, he said. Yes, Arel agreed. But yours repairs. For the first time since she had met him, Ward seemed uncertain how to respond. Outside, Katha's fall breathed again. Not healed. Not saved entirely. But given a second chance. And as Commander Arel Voss stood beside the human who had risked himself for strangers who would never know his name, she began to understand. The galaxy did not honor humans because they were unstoppable. It honored them because they refused to let others fall, even when it cost them. And this mission was far from over. Because energy was only the first problem. Behind the factions, behind the instability, there was something else manipulating events. Something far larger than civil war. And in orbit above the planet, an unidentified vessel had just entered the system. Orbit above Katha's fall was no longer empty. The unidentified vessel that had slipped into the system 2 days earlier now hung in high polar orbit, masked behind distorted sensor signatures. It was not broadcasting. It was not responding. And it was not Concord. Inside the operations room of the cruiser Silent Resolve, holographic projections rotated slowly, highlighting gravitational anomalies around the unknown craft. Commander Arel Voss stood beside Captain Elias Ward, arms folded, eyes fixed on the projection. The Halion tactician spoke first. The vessel does not match any registered design within the Galactic Concord database. Hull geometry suggests modular weapon platforms. General Croth's voice rumbled low. A hidden sponsor. Ward nodded faintly. The pirates didn't destabilize Katha's fall alone. On the planetary surface, power had been restored to critical systems. Water flowed again. Food production stabilized. But the civil conflict had not disappeared entirely. It had shifted. Both factions now possessed off-world communication relays they should not have had. Someone had been supplying them. And someone was watching. Arel turned toward Ward. You anticipated this. He didn't answer immediately. He zoomed the projection closer to the unidentified ship. No pirate syndicate operates this cleanly, he said at last. Too coordinated. Too patient. Croth flexed his claws. Then we strike first. Ward shook his head. If that vessel belongs to a larger network, destroying it might trigger retaliation elsewhere. You suggest caution again, Croth growled. I suggest information. Arel watched the exchange with growing clarity. Where most commanders saw targets, Ward saw systems. Cause and effect. Ripples beyond immediate victory. That was why species lined up for assignments beside humans. They did not chase glory. They chased solutions. Hours later, a covert shuttle detached from Silent Resolve. Its destination, the unidentified ship. Minimal power signature. Silent approach. Arel sat opposite Ward as the shuttle cut through darkness. You are aware, she said evenly, that this operation may escalate into direct engagement. Ward offered a small smile. I'm aware. You once claimed to be ordinary. I still am. She studied him. You stepped into a reactor core to prevent catastrophe. Seemed practical at the time. Most beings would not calculate practicality that way. He shrugged lightly. Most beings don't grow up learning that mistakes can be fixed if you try hard enough. She absorbed that quietly. Human culture fascinated her. Failure was not final. It was iterative. The shuttle latched onto the vessel's underbelly without resistance. No alarms triggered. No defensive drones deployed. That worried Arel more than hostility would have. Inside the airlock, the team moved with disciplined silence. Corridors were dimly lit. Automated systems hummed softly. No visible crew. The Helion tactician interfaced with a wall terminal. Remote operation confirmed, she whispered. No life signs aboard. Croft's golden eyes narrowed. A drone command ship. Ward moved deeper into the vessel, scanning data nodes. They've been coordinating arms drops across multiple systems, he said quietly. Not just Katha's fall. Arel's pulse quickened. This is larger than regional destabilization. Ward nodded. Their engineering collapses. Weakening frontier civilizations before they can join the Concord. Croft's claws scraped softly against the metal floor. A preemptive suppression strategy. Exactly, Ward replied. He accessed a central control core. Data streams flooded across his interface. Arel watched his expression shift from analysis to realization. This isn't just arms trafficking, he said slowly. They're mapping political response times. Testing how quickly the Concord intervenes. Silence filled the corridor. They were being studied. Suddenly the ship shuddered. External engines powered up. The drone vessel began accelerating. They've detected intrusion, the Helion tactician warned. Ward's fingers flew across the interface. They're attempting remote purge. If they wipe this data, we lose evidence. Croft stepped toward the exit. Then we extract. Not yet, Ward said sharply. He bypassed encrypted firewalls with alarming speed. Lines of code cascaded across the projection. Arel felt something shift again inside her chest. This was not reckless bravery. This was controlled defiance. Ward isolated the command network and injected a recursive loop. The vessel's engines flickered, stuttered, then powered down. You shut it off? Croth asked. Temporarily, Ward replied. I redirected its own safety protocols against it. Arel tilted her head slightly. You weaponized its restraint. He smirked faintly. Something like that. But the reprieve was brief. New signals flooded the display. 3 more vessels dropped from hyperspace at the edge of the system. Larger. Heavily armed. Reinforcements. Croft's voice deepened. We cannot engage that force. Ward nodded. We don't. Arel looked at him sharply. Clarify. He turned the hologram outward. If this network thrives on secrecy and destabilization, we expose it. You intend public transmission, the Helion tactician realized. Full data dumped to every Concord channel. Croft's eyes narrowed. That will provoke response. Ward's gaze hardened. Good. Back aboard Silent Resolve, Emergency signals erupted across Concorde space. Encrypted packets transmitted from the drone vessel contained proof. Supply chains. Manipulated civil wars. Targeted destabilization of emerging civilizations. The conspiracy was no longer hidden. Within hours, Concorde fleets began mobilizing. Not in retaliation. In coordinated defense. The hostile reinforcements in orbit hesitated. Their advantage had been secrecy. Now they had none. One by one, the vessels retreated into hyperspace. Silence returned to orbit. The drone ship drifted powerless, captured. On Katha's fall, political factions received new transmissions from Concorde mediators, armed with evidence that both sides had been manipulated. Negotiations began. Not perfect, not instant, but genuine. Back in the quiet of the cruiser's observation deck, Arel stood beside Ward, watching the planet below. "You prevented escalation," she said softly. He exhaled slowly. "We prevented it. You saw the pattern before the rest of us. I've seen similar ones before." She studied his profile. "You do not dominate the battlefield. No. You dismantle it." He smiled faintly. "That's usually the goal." Croft joined them, folding his massive arms. "Your strategy avoided fleet confrontation." Ward nodded. "Fighting the symptom rarely cures the disease." Arel felt clarity settle within her. This was the honor. Not standing beside an unstoppable warrior. Not witnessing overwhelming force. But fighting beside someone who refused to let violence be the first answer. Someone who calculated beyond pride. Who valued lives unseen. Who repaired what others exploited. Below them, the lights of Katha's fall glowed steadily for the first time in months. Civilian broadcasts replaced distress signals. Stability was fragile. But real. Arel turned toward Ward. "When this mission was announced," she said carefully, "species competed for the opportunity to fight beside a human." He winced faintly. "Still don't understand that." "I do," she replied. He raised an eyebrow. She met his gaze without hesitation. "The galaxy's greatest honor is not fighting beside a human because you are invincible." She gestured toward the planet below. "It is because you fight for more than victory." Ward was silent for a moment. Then he looked back at the stars. "Guess we just try not to make things worse." Arel allowed herself a rare smile. "In that effort, Captain Ward, you succeed." But even as calm settled over the system, long-range sensors detected faint distortions at the edge of mapped space. The exposed network was only one branch. Something deeper stirred in the shadows beyond the frontier. And this time, they would be ready. Because now the galaxy understood something vital. The greatest honor was not merely standing beside a human in battle. It was learning how they chose to fight. The war for Caldrus Prime did not end with a final explosion. It ended with silence. A strange, trembling silence that spread across orbit like a held breath finally released. The Dravari command lattice flickered once, then collapsed entirely. Across Allied comm channels, stunned reports echoed. Enemy coordination lost. Autonomous units inactive. Dravari signal grid offline. General Kael'vari stood at the shattered observation deck of the Allied flagship and watched the last hostile vessels drift powerless in the void. Around him stood representatives from 12 species. All of them staring at one small blue and white planet rotating calmly below. The species they had once doubted. The species they had once feared. The species that had just saved them all. But Earth had not won by annihilation. They had won by understanding. The final phase of humanity's plan had not been a weapon. It had been a pattern. Months before the battle, Dr. Elias Cade and the Earth Coalition Science Directorate had studied captured fragments of Dravari command code. They discovered something the galaxy had overlooked. The Dravari were not merely a hive mind. They were a predictive intelligence network. Their entire military doctrine depended on anticipating enemy reactions and responding milliseconds before action occurred. They did not overpower. They pre-countered. So humanity did something radical. They refused to be predictable. Human fleets operated under distributed intent doctrine. Commanders were given objectives, not rigid orders. AI suggested paths, but never dictated them. And sometimes, soldiers were trained to intentionally make illogical moves. To any other species this seemed inefficient. To the Dravari it was catastrophic. When the final assault began, human forces didn't aim to destroy the core lattice. They flooded it with chaotic tactical inputs. Formations that broke symmetry, retreats that became ambushes, feints layered within feints. The predictive lattice overloaded itself trying to reconcile contradictory probabilities. In trying to outthink humanity, it thought itself into collapse. The Allied fleet had witnessed something historic. The first time in galactic memory that the Dravari had been defeated not by superior force, but by superior adaptability. In the hours after victory, no cheers erupted. Instead, there were quiet transmissions. Gratitude. From the Thalen hive world. From the Serati academies. From the Vektari warrior houses. From dozens more. A universal message began circulating through the Interstellar Council network. Request formal recognition of Earth Coalition for highest honor classification. The phrase rippled across political channels. For centuries, the galaxy's greatest award had been reserved for species that demonstrated unmatched technological supremacy. But today something had changed. Supremacy was no longer the highest virtue. Courage had contenders. Intelligence had rivals. But loyalty under fire, that was rare. 3 weeks later, delegates gathered in orbit above Caldrus Prime for the emergency convocation of the Galactic Accord. The chamber floated within a transparent sphere overlooking the scarred planet below. Admiral Amara Reyes stood at the center dais. She wore no medals, no ceremonial armor, just the simple uniform of the Earth Coalition fleet. Across from her stood High Executor Viral of the Serati. His crystalline form refracted starlight as he spoke. For generations our people believed honor was dominance. That glory came from proving superiority. He paused. Humanity has shown us a greater truth. A hollow display ignited above the chamber. Footage from the battle streamed silently. Human ships shielding Allied transports. Medics evacuating wounded Serati engineers. Thalen drones coordinating with Terran pilots. Vektari warriors standing shoulder to shoulder with Earth Marines in zero-gravity corridors. This war was not won by one species, Viral continued. But without humanity, it would have been lost. He turned fully toward Reyes. Therefore, by unanimous vote of the Interstellar Accord, the title of highest galactic honor shall be redefined. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Viral's voice resonated. The highest honor in the galaxy is not to rule beside humanity. It is not to trade beside humanity. It is not even to learn from humanity. It is to fight beside humanity. Silence. Then, light. Every delegate activated their sigil in synchronized acknowledgement. A galaxy-wide transmission carried the declaration. Across colonies, space stations, mining worlds, and research outposts, beings of countless forms watched as Earth's emblem appeared beside the Accord crest. Not above it. Beside it. Equal. Admiral Reyes stepped forward. For the record, she said calmly, humanity did not fight for honor. She glanced toward the image of Caldrus Prime. We fought because standing alone is inefficient. A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. We fought because shared survival increases probability of long-term success. Another ripple, this time understanding. And we fought because when one species falls, the galaxy becomes smaller. She looked up. We prefer it vast. The chamber erupted, not in cheers, but in the multi-tonal resonance of a dozen species expressing respect. But the story did not end with a ceremony. It continued in classrooms, in military academies, in diplomatic forums. Human tactical doctrine became required study material across Allied fleets. But so did something else. The Earth Coalition published their full analysis of the Dravari collapse. Open source. No secrecy. No hidden advantage. When questioned why they would share such valuable strategic insight, Dr. Elias Cade responded in an interview broadcast across Accord networks. If only one species understands how to resist domination, the galaxy remains fragile. But if everyone understands it, he smiled slightly, then no single mind can ever rule it. Months passed. Caldrus Prime began reconstruction. Human engineers worked alongside Serati architects and Thalen bioshapers to restore ecosystems rather than exploit them. The Vektari warrior houses requested permanent joint training exchanges with Earth Marines. The Thalen requested collaboration in distributed cognition research, curious about humanity's decentralized decision-making. And something subtle began to shift. Species that once competed began coordinating. Not because Earth demanded it, but because they had witnessed a different model of strength. Strength through trust. Strength through shared risk. Strength through unpredictable cooperation. Years later, a new crisis would emerge beyond the outer veil. And when the emergency call went out, something unprecedented happened. Dozens of fleets responded simultaneously. Not because they were ordered, but because they wanted to stand beside humanity again. Because they now understood. To fight beside humans was not an act of submission. It was an act of partnership. A declaration that survival was better together. And across the stars, a phrase entered common speech among warriors of every species. May we earn the right to stand with them. Not out of fear. Not out of obligation. But out of respect. On Earth, Admiral Reyes retired quietly. She declined monuments. She declined statues. Instead, she requested something simple. A scholarship fund for interspecies strategic studies. Because humanity's greatest weapon had never been a warship. It had been curiosity. And in a quiet observatory overlooking the Pacific Ocean, Dr. Elias Cade once looked up at the night sky and said, "They used to fear us." A young cadet beside him asked, "Do they still?" Cade considered the question. "They respect us." He gestured upward. And that's far more stable. Far beyond Earth, on a distant academy world, a Sarati instructor addressed a hall filled with cadets of multiple species. He displayed a simple phrase on the projection field. Highest galactic honor, to fight beside a human. One student raised a limb. Why? The instructor dimmed the lights. Images of Caldrus Prime filled the chamber. Because when they stand with you, he said, they do not seek to control the outcome. They seek to improve it. The lesson ended. The cadets rose. And somewhere in the vastness of the galaxy, alliances grew stronger, not from fear of humanity's power, but from faith in humanity's principles. The Dravari would one day rebuild in scattered remnants. New threats would rise. The universe would remain uncertain. But one truth had been etched into galactic history. The greatest honor was not victory. It was shared resilience. And in a galaxy once fractured by rivalry, the species once ridiculed as chaotic and primitive had become something far greater. Not conquerors. Not rulers. But partners. And whenever allied fleets formed up in the dark between stars, there was always a quiet sense of reassurance when a human vessel slid into formation. Because everyone knew. If humans were beside you, the future was still open.